Okay, here's the thing with Julian Assange. There's a lot of things, but just in case for people who don't know, of course, this is the guy, the founder and director of WikiLeaks. He was essentially framed up on some bogus sexual assault charges under the pressure by the Swedish government, under the pressure of the United States government, that we got to find something to hold this guy on. And so they trumped up some sexual assault charges, and he agreed to go to Sweden to be questioned on those charges. And there weren't even charges, frankly. They were just, to be clear about that, they were just accusations, and, you know, you're a suspect wanted for questioning kind of thing is all. And so then what happened was he said as long as he could get assurances that he would not be extradited to the United States, like a sworn promise, he would not be extradited for espionage charges to the United States, then he would go to Sweden and talk to them. And they would not give him those assurances. He invited them to come to England and talk to him, but they wouldn't come to England and talk to him, even though the Swiss and the English cooperate like that all the time. They didn't want to do that. They're trying to get their hands on him. So eventually he skipped bail in the UK, where, you know, they had him on a holding pattern thing for answering the charges or the accusations from the Swedes. And he dipped and went to the Ecuadorian embassy there in the UK. And there he was holed up he was given asylum by the previous government of Ecuador under Correa, I think it is, right? And then he was holed up in there for 7 years. And the whole time he was holed up in there, people who were on his side and knew the truth and are honest about this, like, for example, his fan club over at antiwar.com and so forth, we knew that it was true all along. And they admitted it from time to time in the press, that they were at least looking at espionage charges against him. And, you know, that can be a life sentence. And then the accusation, you know, the mainstream media interpretation of all of this, you know, was that, oh, yeah, right, you know, Assange is just a conspiracy kook, and, you know, he's just fantasizing on his messiah complex and his megalomania, that, oh, yeah, sure, like the Americans are going to indict you for espionage. He's just hiding from his sexual assault accusations, blah, blah, blah. Well, it turned out that wasn't true at all. In fact, the Obama government had a grand jury, and they investigated. They ended up not charging him with espionage, but they almost did. They came right up to, you know, arguing, you know, big argument on the decision of whether to do it or not. And they ran up, this is extremely important, they ran up against what they called the New York Times problem. And that was, the fact is, Pete, Assange is a publisher. He is not a leaker. He is a leakee. And in America, we don't have an Official Secrets Act. We have an Espionage Act, and the Espionage Act, in fact, is written so broadly that it does cover anybody, but it's never been used that way. You know, they have used espionage mercilessly against government leakers, beginning with Daniel Ellsberg, who they tried to give life. And by the way, he was not acquitted. He was facing life. But what happened was Nixon hired Cuban hitmen to murder him, and also tried to bribe the judge with a Supreme Court seat. And the judge said, that's it, you're free to go. We're not doing this anymore, kind of thing. So that was what happened to him. But then under Bush and under Obama, especially under Obama, they prosecuted, you know, I don't know, a dozen or more whistleblowers under the Espionage Act. Obama prosecuted more than all other presidents combined before him. And, you know, including John Kiriakou and Drake, and Thomas Drake, the National Security Agency whistleblower, and of course, Chelsea Manning for leaking the stuff to Assange. But anyway, so they're trying to conflate Assange with Manning here, when Manning is the leaker and Assange is the leakee. And the Obama government came up against the actual reality and said, well, look, if we prosecute Assange under the Espionage Act for publishing this stuff, then the New York Times is liable for the same thing. And guess what? He worked as partners on the Iraq and Afghan war logs and State Department cables with the New York Times. And they published this stuff in cooperation with him. And so the Obama government was looking for a distinction with a difference, and they couldn't find it. Well, the Trump government said, screw that. We don't care about that anyway. Forget the New York Times problem. We want to prosecute this guy. And their way around the New York Times problem was that Mike Pompeo, when he was the head of the CIA, said, these guys are, WikiLeaks is a hostile non-state intelligence agency. I forgot the exact phrase, but that's very close to what he said. Well, that doesn't mean anything. A non-state intelligence agency. Yeah, that publishes their stuff open source for the public. In other words, it's a newspaper. It's an internet. It's the Drudge Report. It's indistinguishable from the New York Times website, from WashingtonPost.com or WallStreetJournal.com. There's, they have no argument, really. WSJ, I guess. But they've done it, right? They've indicted him on 18 total charges. One of them, I guess, was a computer crime, and 17 of them are Espionage Act charges. And then they went in there, they raided the Ecuadorian embassy. There was a change in government in Ecuador, and the new guy was compliant. And they went in there and they grabbed him, and they put him in solitary confinement in the Belmarsh prison, where they hold Al-Qaeda terrorists and people like that in, above maximum security type conditions there, supermax conditions, 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, essentially. And importantly, oh man, let me get my times straight in my head here. Peter, I'm going to say it was earlier this year. It was not last fall. It must have been this spring when I'm so sorry why that's not thumbtacked onto my timeline in my brain where it belongs exactly. I'm fairly sure it was earlier this year that, it must have just been a few months ago that I guess they had some hearings last year, but the decision came this year. And the judge, whose name was Barrister, which is a bit confusing because that's what they call a lawyer over there, but the judge ruled that Assange cannot be extradited to the United States. And the reason why is because of the barbarian conditions in American prisons. And that this guy has some sort of severe case of autism and depression and is suicidal. And if they lock him up in the Supermax or in one of these other prisons under what they call the CMUs, the Communications Management Units, or the SAMs, the Special Administrative Measures, that, this is, administrative, sounds like something out of Israel, right? Administrative detention, this kind of thing. This is where, people are treated beyond supermax conditions, where they're not allowed to talk with anyone. They're, completely locked away from the outside world. The whole theory is that everyone in there is Omar Abdel Rahman from Islamic Jihad trying to send secret messages to his followers back to commit terrorist attacks and whatever. And then they just pretend that applies to everybody in there. Now, I've done shows on this in the past. There was this great reporter named Potter. Sorry, I forget his first name. It's almost certain it's Potter, who did great work on this, how they had leftist activists who were like Earth First and animal liberation activists and stuff locked up there under these communication management units and these special administrative measures where they can't even talk to their lawyers. They can't talk to their families. Their visitation is, extremely limited, their communications, anyway. So the judge ruled, based on the testimony of these psychiatrists, that she's afraid that because America's prison system is so barbaric and lawless, that he might kill himself. And under British law, that's a reason enough to deny extradition. So now what's happened yesterday and today is the American government is appealing that and arguing against that. And they spent all day yesterday making their case essentially against the judge's ruling and saying that she ruled based on the wrong criteria and this kind of thing. And then also trying to attack the psychiatrist who had diagnosed Assange, I guess, in the most severe way compared to the other psychiatrists. And then today, and I'm sorry that I'm a little bit behind on today's news, but I know today was Assange's attorney's chances, to push back on those things and argue against the case that the prosecutors made. So one of the things that was funny about it was, this is from, and by the way, I'm getting, all of this coverage comes from Kevin Gotstola, the great Kevin Gotstola. It's Gosstola, and it's just K Gotstola is his Twitter feed. I'm looking right at it. Let me make sure that's right. It's K Gosstola, okay? Gosstola. And he had the access to the video stream, press pass to the video stream, and he took minute notes, live blogging it on Twitter all day yesterday and today. And then he also writes at thedissenter.org, and he had a great piece. I read his piece earlier this afternoon on what happened yesterday, and I'm sure he'll have a new piece, and I'm going to interview him tomorrow on my show. So we'll have that for you as soon as I can. But one of the things that the American lawyer was saying, Judge, there's no reason to believe that Assange would be held in a supermax, and the U.S. government offers its assurances that he will not be held in a supermax, and he will not be held in a CMU, and he will not be held under the SAMs. And then his argument was those assurances are to be taken as legally binding, or you are to take them as factual or something. You're not allowed to say, well, that's just a promise. You have to accept it. And then I think Assange's lawyers were arguing opposite of that you don't have to accept it. And I think the Americans were even promising that if he's convicted, they'll send him to Australia and he'll serve time in Australia, not here. And they also said, why, look at the very light sentences that were given to Daniel Hale and Reality Winner, that they only got, dozens of months. I think Hale got 15 months, a dozen months plus a little bit. And then Reality Winner, I think, got 36 months, right? So 3 years. That's not that light of a sentence, and then they also argued that, hey, Judge, if you extradite him, that could be the first step to setting him free, because maybe Assange could argue that he hadn't gotten a speedy trial, or maybe he could argue that the First Amendment protects what he did, and then the charges will be dismissed and he'll be free to go. What? That's the argument of the prosecutor, the American lawyer arguing, turn him over to us, is that, hey, he's got a very good chance of getting out of this anyway. We hardly have a case. We haven't given him a speedy trial. Everybody knows the First Amendment protects publishers. What? And I mean, if that works, if they hide behind that to say that they're convinced then that it's okay to let him go, then that would be an atrocity itself. That is just absolutely absurd for them. If they're making that argument, then they ought to just drop the charges then. If you're telling me you concede he didn't get a fair trial, and that the First Amendment, the inviolate First Amendment of the American Constitution, says that you can publish secrets if you want to, essentially, then drop the charges and let the whole thing slide. It's crazy that they're doing this. Oh, and by the way, too, they kept him out of the room, and his wife disputed. I think they claimed that, well, he was sick and couldn't attend, and his wife said that wasn't true. He wanted to attend, and they wouldn't let him. But Kevin did say that he appeared very tired and was like leaning on his hand and, not looking good. So I don't know if he, like, when they say sick, does that mean didn't feel well? Because they gave him like extra runny eggs this morning, or that means like there's something really wrong with him, or, I don't know. It's probably safe to assume the worst there. I don't know. And then only other things on my list here to mention is, and then I'll ask my brain if there's something else, but the murder plots. There's this new story that came out. Isikoff and friends, writing at Yahoo News, put out a story a couple of weeks ago, like 2-3 weeks ago now, about all the CIA plans to murder this guy and how they really meant to do it. They wanted to do it, and they were trying to figure out ways to do it. And of course, There's endless reporting before this by Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone and others as well about the spies, the Spanish mercenary spy group that was sent to spy on this guy. And then the CIA was using Sheldon Adelson and his private security company in Las Vegas as the cutouts to, partially to spy on Assange. And when he's speaking with his lawyers, Pete, which means that you can't prosecute him then. That ain't fair. You don't get to prosecute a guy after the executive branch spied on him and his lawyers talking together. There's got to be an exclusionary rule there. I don't know the case law, but I know there must be, that you just can't do that. It used to be people say, hey, this is America, man. And that meant that you can't do that, right? You can do some things, but you can't do that. But I don't know. Maybe they can. But it sure seems like they're way over the line here. And then I guess the last thing I'll say about this is look at the press corps. That son of a bitch, Charlie Savage over at the New York Times, his ass is on the line here too, right? When all he does is publish, CIA stenography, what they want him to say, not what some courageous CIA whistleblower wants him to say, but what, the top commanders want him to print. But still, I mean, he and all the others at the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, anybody, the Wall Street Journal, anybody who deals in classified information at all are in severe jeopardy if this precedent is set. And where are they all? They don't like him because he published the DNC leak, which wasn't hacked by Russia anyway, had nothing to do with Russia anyway. But that helped get Trump elected. And therefore, Assange is what, a Russian agent or a non-state hostile intelligence agency, something. And they throw him under the bus. They sacrifice him to Moloch. Like, now they're going to get away. Now everything's going to be fine. And again, these same people who published, at just the papers that I mentioned there, the Post, the Times, the Journal, etc., just a few of those, between them published hundreds and hundreds of articles based either primarily on something in the WikiLeaks or at least have somewhere in there as State Department cables from 2007 verify, etc., right? Where at least they are cited as partial corroboration of the truth in those stories. At the very least, hundreds, probably thousands, just at those few papers. And when you're talking about around the world, probably 10,000 news stories, certainly thousands upon thousands of news stories. In fact, you could just put in Google, as State Department cables show, as the WikiLeaks reveal, phrases like that, and you will get thousands and thousands and thousands of results. I mean, real results from publications around alternative and mainstream because of all of the absolutely important and newsworthy stuff in there. And remember, too, back when they arrested Manning and, began the campaign to demonize Assange, the whole story was that these two have blood on their hands, because the stuff that they've released, it's so top secret. It's going to get all of our informants rounded up and their throats cut. It's going to get, all of our spies, behind enemy lines killed and all these things. None of that was true. None of it. And Robert Gates, the Secretary of Defense, admitted it. And at Chelsea Manning's court-martial, the prosecutor admitted it, that there was no evidence to that. Hear me? No evidence. The prosecutor at the court-martial admitted they had no evidence that anyone was killed because they were named in the WikiLeaks. Their operation was revealed in the WikiLeaks. What they put out, the Manning leak, was essentially secret, not top secret. Just regular old secret level information. And they put that on the SIPRNet, after September 11th. They put a lot more information on those internal government networks, knowing that there was a higher risk of leaks, but judging that the importance of information sharing was more important. And for this level of material, which was confidential and secret level, that it was a risk worth taking. And it probably was. Even, knowing that the leak came out and was published at WikiLeaks, because there were no consequences in terms of, like you would expect in the rumors. like spies behind Russian lines getting caught and executed, or some kind of thing like that. Nothing like that happened. All that happened was the people got a taste of the truth of what was really going on under the empire. That was what was wrong. That was all this blood on their hands. What they meant was, this stuff is embarrassing, right? Because there's no accountability. It's not like anyone working for W. Bush or Hillary Clinton, the Barack Obama government went to jail over stuff in the WikiLeaks, no matter how ugly some of it was. Nobody went to jail. I mean, they admitted they lied about the number of combat deaths in Iraq. They lied about, continuing to turn people over to the Bada Brigade and Wolf Brigade to be tortured to death and all of this stuff. Nobody went to jail. It was embarrassing, Pete. It was the worst that they had on them. And that's, and then, that's what he's being charged with, right? None of this, for any liberals who are saying, well, serves him right for serving the Russians' agenda for Trump or whatever. First of all, that was complete crap. Never happened anyway. But secondly, that doesn't have anything to do with the charges here. There's no Russia. This is about the Manning leak. That's what he's being prosecuted for. The heroic Bradley/Chelsea Manning leak to WikiLeaks, the Iraq and Afghan war logs, the State Department cables, the Guantanamo files. And this is some of the most, again, underwriting much of the best journalism of the last decade is based on this stuff. It's absolutely crucial that this stuff came forward. And so everything is on the line for the freedom of the press in this country. If they are successful in extraditing this guy and prosecuting him, then that puts all of national security journalism in America, in severe jeopardy. And you know what? That's what I meant to say on Kennedy the other night in the Fauci answer. You have so little time to answer on that show, and then you only get one answer per question. And me, I like explaining. But that was one thing I wanted to say about the Fauci thing and the Wuhan and all that. This is why they got Julian Assange locked up. Because if he was out, we would already know the truth. That's what WikiLeaks is. WikiLeaks is where the people who know the truth can get it to the people. And that's why he's in solitary confinement after the bogus sexual assault accusations have already been completely retracted. After that case has been completely dropped. He's being held now on skipping bail on some questions that they don't even want to ask him anymore. And it's because he's too good at his job. That's it.
Well, and it's also important to point out that depending on what was being released, the left would be pro him or for him. When it hurt, when it made Bush look bad, everything was fine. When it made Obama or especially Hillary Clinton look bad, then it's not. Well, that's not good. The right was terrible on the Manning leak because they totally bought into the whole blood on his hands thing. Even people that I knew who were on the right had to explain to them. I'm talking about regular people because they just buy the line. They don't go any deeper. That for all the screaming of fake news, everything they know about Waco and the Manning leak and everything like that, they get from the fake news, so it's like complete hypocrites. And
that's such an important point. But before you go on, because I'll forget that what you just said there, that both sides, such as they are, have reason to hate the guy, right? When what it should be is, okay, well, look, I'm mad that he hurt Hillary Clinton, but man, that Manning leak was so important. Or look, I'm mad at him for the Manning leak, but hell yeah, he helped take down Hillary Clinton at least, right? Instead of people being positive and looking at the good that he's done for their side, instead they hate him and they all forsake him. It's disgusting, man.
And disgusting. And to go back to like the sexual accusations and everything, I mean, Stacey read all like the interviews and stuff like that. I mean, the police were like taking, like one of the women would say, well, he did this. And then they go, no, actually, no, I misremembered. He didn't do that. And they'd include the thing that the person had just corrected. I mean, it was
Right.
just a witch hunt right from the
Absolutely.
start. It was like, I mean, if there's anything that is even close to being like the truth, is that one of them was upset because he may have taken a condom off. And
Right.
that's like really the only thing that was like, I mean, those women walked out of the interview like, well, I mean, they asked us questions, but nothing happened. And then everybody just they just blew it up and just basically made stuff up.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah,
and I mean,
and one of the women said so. One of the women said, "Hey, man, they have me quoting. They quote me saying things I never said. I mean, this is
right.
crazy." She was outraged by it. One of the
Yeah.
women was.
And it just
But
goes to
listen,
show you, how much power the friggin' CIA has, because I mean, that's the Swedish authorities.
that's right. And listen, so here's what happened, man. And you can find this. Um, I should have this reposted on my own website somewhere in the fair use section for safekeeping or something, man. It's really important. This guy, his name is Nils Melzer, Nilsmelzer. Okay, he's the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture. I think that's how you say that. And so he wrote a thing about people were bugging him to look into this. And he kept saying, yeah, and thinking it's just too partisan and whatever his problem was. He didn't want to do it. Then he looked into it. But he has the jurisdiction to look into it, right? He has the authority to look into it in a real way. So they had to I don't know if they had to. They cooperated in turning over documents to him and all of these things. And he wrote up this whole thing about what a sham it was. And he gets really specific on what you just said. CIA putting pressure on the Swedes. What do you mean you let him go? You had your hands on Assange and you let him leave the damn country? Fix it. And the Swedes go, okay, whatever you say, Americans. And then go and put the pressure on the British and whatever. Where, again, in other words, this is pure persecution under the color of law, right? This has nothing to do with enforcing the law and everything to do with American intelligence agencies have a vendetta against this guy and they want his ass and they'll do anything to get him.